All right, welcome back to the Contrarians. We are back at it again. We've got another great panel discussion for you tonight. We have a Dark Horse album, Kiss Unmasked. Album was released in 1980, May 20th. It's typically a poorly reviewed album, so we'll see tonight whether that carries or if there's some contrarian opinions out there. If you like the channel, if you want to help the channel grow, you can give a like, you can give a subscribe, you can share with your friends, and there's other ways to support the channel in the description below. But most importantly, you can also comment and join the discussion. There's always a second debate in the comments below, and you should join it. We want to hear from you. So thank you to our panelists. I'm going to get started in no particular order. Let's go to David first. David, your review of Unmasked.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Excited to be here and talk about this record. Like you said, probably generally poorly received by most fans of the band and of music in general, not necessarily one that's generally thought of very highly in the catalog. I think when I do these, generally timeline always seems to come up in my, when I preface this, but for me, timeline, particularly with Kiss, I come in sort of late in the game. So my entry point is late 80s. And so now I'm going back and sort of buying cassette tapes, not in order. Right. And so my perspective is probably a little bit different than somebody that's following Kiss in the 70s and sort of coming into this era, maybe picking up these records and such a departure from, some of the classic 6 studio records that, preceded and all of that. And then sort of instead of getting harder, coming off Dynasty, it sort of almost goes the opposite direction, goes deeper, more pop. They stick with Vinnie Poncia as a producer. My feelings on this record have sort of evolved over the years. When I first got this, started listening to it, I really liked the album out of the gate, particularly the first couple of tracks. I thought, and over time, I think those tracks have not aged particularly well for me. Not really a skip. If I'm in the mood for this record, I'll play them. But I think Is That You and Shandy are not the strongest songs on the record. In retrospect, or sort of as this record has aged with me, I think leading off with a cover is interesting. I didn't know it was a cover maybe in the beginning, and start reading the liner notes and realizing that Is That You is a cover. To me, it sort of doesn't fit as well as a Kiss song, let alone a lead-off track. Like I said, there was a point where I really liked this a lot more than I like it today. Shandy the same way. I don't think it has really aged particularly well for me. I know it did extremely well in Australia, but I think it's a little bit too. This whole album, is soft and doesn't have any edge to it. But Shandy, I think, is particularly bubblegum and is sort of not aged particularly well. That said, a lot of what's left on side A is pretty good. I think Talk to Me is a really good song. He contributes a lot to this record. If you think about it, Paul, as usual, has lead vocals on 5 of the 11 tracks, but Ace and Gene sort of split the remaining 6, which is unusual for, Ace, I don't think, sang a vocal until Love Gun. And here he is now sort of evolved into a place where now he's got as many lead vocals as Gene does. So really in a short period of time, in 3 years, he's gone from, being sort of a reluctant singer and not really doing any vocals until 1977 to 3 years later, he's got 3 tracks on the record. And I think they're pretty strong overall. I like Talk to Me. I think Naked City, Gene is not particularly strong on this record. But I think Naked City is sort of a strong track. I think that the riff, the song itself, if it was produced maybe differently with a little more edge, is a really, really good Kiss song. I think Naked City, I like that track a lot. What Makes the World Go Round is, I think, pretty Midland. Going to side B, just kind of going through these tracks a little bit. I think Tomorrow is, really a hit. It's a really pop perfection as a pop song. I mean, really could be a hit. Maybe Kiss had already sort of fallen off of the radar of maybe mainstream music, and Kiss fans have started to bail. Some of the hardcore Kiss fans maybe had started to bail by this time and started to gravitate toward, new wave of British heavy metal and some of the edgier bands that are coming out. But I think Tomorrow is really, really good pop song. Like I said, pretty much in my mind, pop perfection. I like Easy as It Seems. I like the bass riff. A lot of people don't like it. It's kind of, disco-y, but I think that's a really cool track. I never skip it. Probably to this day, one of my favorite tracks. I think it's a well-written song by Paul. I think it's interesting that there's a lot of, I think on this record, maybe more so than in the past, Kiss is leaning on, they've gone, like I said, as I mentioned, they went back to Vinnie Ponce as a producer coming off Dynasty. And, so you've got a really pop edge. It's really soft. It's not edgy. There's a lot of keyboards. The guitars are really tame. A lot of outside writers too. So they're bringing in people. Not only do they have the cover to lead off the record, but I think almost every track, I'd have to go back and look, but almost every track, with the exception of maybe one or two, has some type of outside writer. So that's different, right? Different direction that they seem to be evolving to here. So overall, I think the record has some really, really strong material. Naked City, Tomorrow, Easy as It Seems. I like those songs. I think it's balanced by some pretty Midland material. I think Ace is strong on this. I think Torpedo Girl is kind of weird lyrically, but I think that the song is pretty cool if I get past some of the oddity of the lyrics. Though I never go to Kiss for, really meaningful lyrics, right? That's not what I'm looking for there. So it's hard to bash Kiss for lyrics. But I think Ace has a strong showing. Like Talk to Me, Two Sides of the Coin, Torpedo Girl, Strongest. I think Ace has a real strong showing. I think that balances things out a little bit. So overall, I think it's probably, for me, Midland in the Kiss catalog. I don't, I go to it fairly frequently. It depends on my mood. That's what I like about the Kiss catalog, is depending on my mood, the 80s stuff is so much different than the classic 70s stuff. And then the stuff in the middle with Dynasty Unmasked, very different. I think this is a good example of Kiss sort of getting into their first real, starting to chase trends and listen to outside noise and producers and try and do things, maybe a little bit lost in this period and stay lost. I think as evident of what comes after this. There's a lot going on. You've got a lineup change. Peter's not on this record at all. He's on the cover, doesn't play a lick. It's all Anton Fig. So a lot's happening in Kiss world, and I think that shines through here. But I don't think it's a terrible record. I'm going to give it, on this day, 6 out of 10.
Nice.
All right. Well, it seems like cool. Good review. Yeah. All right, let's go to Tim next, and then we'll finish up with Martin. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I've got one of my dogs in here with me, and she'll be restless until my wife gets home. So that's why I'm muted when I'm not talking. Unmasked is really interesting. I talked about this when we did our episode on music from the Elders. So I didn't get into Kiss until 1993. And when I did, it was like all the music, not all at once, but just buying a lot of the CDs as I came across them. And Unmasked, before then, Unmasked was one that confused me because I knew enough about Kiss. I always knew Lick It Up was their first non-makeup album, but I was a little bit confused by just seeing Unmasked and knowing that, well, this is not the album where they unmasked, but not caring enough to look at the back of it and say, well, what year did this come out? Like where does this sit in the Kiss catalog? And when I did get into Kiss, the first thing I bought from them was Destroyer. But this CD here is the second CD I ever bought from Kiss, because one of the stores I used to shop at, this was perpetually in the $9.99 bid. This one in particular was always marked down. And so once I decided to start buying Kiss albums, like, well, I might as well get this. It's only $10. And I looked at the back of it. I'm like, oh, Shandy's on this. Okay, well, I know that song because I remember seeing the video on Much Music. And I remember being surprised because it was like, I always thought people said they were this heavy metal band. This is not a heavy song. I don't understand. So I had a lot to learn about this band. But I do remember that for probably a good solid week, this was when I was taking a radio broadcasting course, but me and a couple of guys that I went to the community college with, I crashed at their apartment all the time. And it's like for, I don't know how long, we'd always start the morning off with the first 4 songs on Unmasked. I don't know why. We always stop at the first 4 songs, but I think Is That You was a really cool song. Yeah, it's written by Gerard McMahon, he's kind of a guy that is known behind the scenes. People that grew up in the 80s, if you like the movie The Lost Boys, he has that song, Cry Little Sister. That's probably the best known song he is involved in. Sometimes he's called McMahon, sometimes it's just McMahon. But anyway, I think it's a good vocal by Paul. I think it's kind of got a cool melody to it. It's interesting. It's produced by Vinnie Poncia as Dynasty was, but I don't think it sounds like Dynasty. It's got its own sound. It's different. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying it's different. It's extremely pop. Everything on this album is extremely pop oriented. I think Shandy's a great pop song. I'm glad that it was a hit somewhere in the world. It's a great vocal from Paul, although, the big open secret is that other than Paul, no one in Kiss actually plays on it, because you got Anton Fig on drums, Holly Knight on keyboards, and bass player, I think his name is Tom Harper. He was like Gene's bass tech. So, that's all that, ghost musicians and all of that. I think Talk to Me is a fantastic pop song by Ace. I think it's one of his best vocals. I got to be honest, when they started releasing all of those off the soundboard albums, they all had the same boring, bland, brown album covers. That's one of the only reasons I bought that Tokyo one. Not only it was the novelty of having Ace and Eric Singer on the same album, which I like the idea of that, but they also do Talk to Me. So I think that's cool. I got to hear that. Naked City might be my favorite song on this album. I'm not sure. I definitely think it's one of Gene's best vocals. I think his vocals were hitting a peak around this time, because I think this song and X-Ray Eyes from Dynasty are some of his best actual singing, where he's not just like he's not just doing the growling thing, right? Yeah, it's interesting. Ace, like Dynasty, Ace comes through with 3 songs on this album, and unlike Dynasty, he actually comes through with 3 originals, which are really interesting. Torpedo Girl, I will always get a kick out of, because Unmasked is an album I didn't listen to a lot for many years, but I remember me and a bunch of friends went to see a Kiss cover band, and there was this one guy it was just at a bar, and the next table over from us, this guy, he'd been drinking, and over and over again from the other table, we'd hear, "Come on, get your feet wet." And none of us could remember where that was coming from. It's like, what? Why does he keep doing that? And then finally, I think I must have listened to it. It's like, oh yeah, it's Torpedo Girl. I'm not crazy about that one so much, but as far as Gene's songs go, yeah, you could kind of tell his heart wasn't in this album, with only 3 vocals on it. Usually he and Paul were matched. This was definitely, I think, Paul's baby. And I think he is suited towards that type of material. Like, it is disco-y sounding on stuff like What Makes the World Go Round, especially Easy As It Seems. That's a straight up disco bass line. But, he pulls it off. And I agree. I think that Tomorrow could have been a single had it either come out a couple years sooner or been by another band, because I think we're entering this period where it's like, we don't play Kiss anymore. Like Shandy hit number 47 in the US, and it didn't do that well in Canada either. The album, only went gold. It's never been recertified. It's definitely not my least favorite Kiss album. There's plenty of albums I think fit that bill, but I do have to be in the right mood to listen to it. It's not heavy in the least. I mean, the quote unquote heaviest song is That You? And it's all the edges are smoothed off on this album, but I don't think it's a bad album per se. It just might have been, it's just another, I think this band is so fascinating because people dismiss them as being like a one-trick pony, but they have so many different sounds throughout their career. And this is an album that I think a lot of people might be surprised to hear some of these songs and go, wait, that's Kiss? So anyway, I'm going to give this album, if I have to be brutal about it, because I don't hate it, but it's not one of my favorites either, I think I'm going to give Unmasked a 7. That's going to be my rating.
Nice.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Tim. All right, let's go over to Martin for his review. Martin, floor is yours.
All right. Well, I've come around quite a bit on this album. There is a very negative quote on right on Wikipedia from me about this album. And part of that quote, I still sort of stand by the part that it says, I think it's in that quote that says it sounds like songs from the solo albums. And to my mind now, before I thought it sounded like lousy songs from the solo albums, and now I'm thinking it sounds like pretty good songs from the solo albums. So to address the production, first of all, Tim, you hit it right on the head. Like it's Vinny, but it doesn't sound like Dynasty. Dynasty is more or less sounding like a corrected version of the previous three albums, including Destroyer. I mean, more so Love Gun and more so the Eddie Kramer ones, but it sounds like standard what you want to get out of the guitars and the drums and blah blah blah. Still boxy, nothing remarkable. Here, there's a little bit of a it's more compressed. It is more poppy. The guitars seemed like restrained. The drums are very bright. They're bright, but still boxy and dry sort of thing. And the drums are quite loud. So you get that pop thing where the drums are drowning out the guitars as well. So that's another reason why the guitars sound light on it. But yeah, so it's got this thing where I guess 6 of the songs have just one Kiss member each on them. Ace does all his own stuff, except for the drums, and then Paul does all his own stuff, I guess. But Tim, you're saying there's some guest guys as well, but the one Kiss member thing is pretty interesting on these. What I think with this album, what happens is Pete and I were talking about doing an episode about how even fans of certain albums can be lazy about painting with a broad brush the whole album. And so I was made for loving you, Kiss, it's the disco album. Well, it's not, right? But this one, people say Shandy, and you can't get Shandy out of your mind because it's so pop that you think the rest of it's like that, and nothing else is like that on here. I hate Shandy. I mean, I find it almost like a Leif Garrett Partridge Family sort of song. I don't like the chords on it. I like pop and I like mellow music, but I don't like this slight sort of R&B direction of it, and I don't like the pounding drum thing through a ballad like that. I just really hate the song, right? But of course, nothing else is even close to it, and Only Easy as It Seems, I'm not a fan of either, because that's kind of like a disco-y R&B thing too. But the whole rest of it, I'm kind of on board. I mean, starting with Is That You, pretty rockin', glammy rockin', right? So they're almost sounding a little more like an early 70s UK glam band with this particular production. But it's fairly heavy. It's got a standard boogie Kiss for the chorus. The pre-chorus I don't like. It's got a little falsetto going on. That's the other thing. So you can have a standard, not very heavy, weak tea Kiss song from Love Gun or Rock and Roll Over, right? But the part it transitions to might be a little heavier than that part. On an album like this, you can do the same thing, like on a song like What Makes the World Go Round. You can have the same sort of standard, slightly boogie, weak tea Kiss song, but then the part goes light. So it leans the song light, right? And that's why you get more of this poppy stuff out of it. Talk to Me. I like Ace's stuff all on here. It's all, see, Ace's stuff doesn't sound like it's from the Ace solo album, but Paul's stuff sounds like it could be from the Paul solo album, and Gene's stuff sounds like it could be from the Gene album. The Ace stuff is like poppier and more complicated and less caveman-y, right? And so that's really cool. Naked City is like a straight up reggae, which is kind of cool. It's like literally a reggae tune, which is really cool to hear from Gene. And I agree. It's one of my favorites on the whole thing. Tomorrow is poppy. Again, the thing about Tomorrow, and Paul is well suited to this, it's actually pure power pop. It's like that tough end of new wave when you've got the guitars on it, the Shoes, the Records, the Romantics, that kind of thing, where it sounds like actual power pop. So that's cool. Two Sides of the Coin is good, fairly heavy one, neat bass line to it. She's So European, again, you think of that title and it turns you off, and you think they're doing a new wave thing or a European thing. She's So European, just an annoying Kiss title, right? But the song is essentially a typical, the beat is a little pop. It's got this little hiccup beat in it and a little strange lick in it, a few keys. But other than that, it's kind of, I think we overrate Love Gun and Rock and Roll Over sometimes. This is not appreciably lighter than that, nor is Dynasty. They're all kind of, more or less close. I mean, this is the lightest. And the reason it's the lightest, I think, is that you could take 3/4 of all of those other Kiss albums, and Dynasty doesn't have the super heavy song on it, but the other two have a couple super heavy songs on it that lean those records lighter or heavier. Torpedo Girl is fine too. It's a loopy, strange kind of Ace thing. It's got that strange bass lick thing on it. Again, heavy pop leaning towards hard rock. And You're All That I Want, Gene, typical kind of Kiss pop. Fairly complicated again, though. That's the neat thing about this album. It's got these little details on it, which raise it. And the final thing I want to say, along the lines of the She's So European title, the Shandy song, is the Kiss haircuts, where it just looks like they lop off half their hair. It's not long, it's not short, looks terrible, right? So it's like those three things are such negative imprints on your brain when you're not really looking deep into the album that are going to lean you to hating this thing. So yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised over the years. And Pete and I did an episode about are we finding these records classic because we're bored, right? And Kiss was a perfect example, and Unmasked is an example where once you've examined all the other albums to death, Unmasked is waiting there for you to take a deep look at, or Carnival of Souls or something, right? Or the last two, for that matter, Monster or Sonic Boom, right? But no, I'm finding this in Dynasty I like better. In my mind, Love Gun and Rock and Roll Over have gone down 1.5 points, and Dynasty and Unmasked have gone up a couple of points, kind of thing. So I'm gonna go 6.5 on this.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Martin. That was great. All righty, I'm gonna pull up an average for this.
We're all pretty much in agreement, I guess, eh?
We're looking at somewhere between a 6.5 and a 7. So why don't we just split the difference? We'll say 6.75. I'm sure that's not the actual number. All right. Well, there you have it. It looks like we have an album that I'd say, definitely passes the dark horse test. We got like a good amount of support
I
for
forgot to show my Dutch copy of this. My vinyl is actually Dutch, believe it or not. It's kind of weird how I ended up with this, but it's, the flimsy, bright, the shiny. And I think I got Gene. Is that Gene's signature on there? I think it's Gene's, but
yeah, I think it is.
And then I've got the CD is just the American remaster that I've got.
Of course, I gotta show my 8-track. It's actually a sealed U.S. Columbia House version,
nice.
and the
sweet, yeah.
I hope I didn't get ripped off when I bought this. You can hardly read the comic strip here. It's everything's whited out, but
yeah.
I mean the cover's kind of cool too, right? The whole concept behind it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that like Martin mentioned, where you do only have one Kiss member on each of a lot of the songs. It still sounds like a unified album, though. So I guess that's kudos to Vinnie Poncia for pulling it together. She's So European's interesting because 3 years after that, and I'm getting really obscure now, but Donnie Iris, you guys know who Donnie Iris is, oddly, Love Is Like a Rock. He had a song called She's So European. I remember I was like, well, this must be a cover. It's not. It's a completely different song, but it's such a unique, it's not like Hold On, or it's not a generic title. It's just funny. There's two completely different songs with such a specific title.
Yeah. Cool. Neat.
Awesome. All right. Well, there you have it. For you folks at home, there's the Dark Horse panel for Unmasked. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight and sharing their reviews of Unmasked. I want to thank you at home for watching. If you like the Contrarians, if you want to help the channel grow, you can give a like and give a subscribe. You heard all the things at the beginning there. But thanks for watching. Comment below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.